Today on entitled Parents. Am I the a-hole for no longer letting my mom have a relationship with her only grandchild? I, 25 female, have a daughter, 7 months old, who has recently been diagnosed with epilepsy. She is the first grandchild on both sides of the family, so everyone is wanting to meet her. Well, the weekend that my extended family was in town, staying at my mom's house, she got pneumonia, and anytime she has a fever, she's at risk of having a seizure. So when they asked to come over, I said no, I don't want anyone around her who's been traveling. My mom wasn't happy with that answer and said she would check in later. She later texted me asking again. I say no, and that my answer wasn't going to change. Well, later in the day my daughter has a seizure, and when that happens she is barely able to breathe, so I have to have 9.11 ready just in case things get worse. So I'm literally in the middle of assisting my child when there's a knock on my door. I ignore it and continue assisting my baby. Then my phone starts ringing non-stop. My mother. I ignore it, of course, until my daughter thankfully pulls out of it. After 15 minutes, I finally answer the phone, angry, and tell her that my daughter was having a seizure. Her response, "Oh, but she's better? Can you at least show her us through the window?" I tell her no and to leave. She calls me selfish and tells me that maybe I need to ask God for forgiveness for having her out of wedlock, and maybe that's why she's been having seizures. I had no words, so I just hung up and blocked her. A few days have passed, and my dad has reached out, saying, I'm overreacting, and I need to allow my mom to see her only grandchild. Am I the a-hole? For our next story. My mother feels entitled to my child. I have a 10-month-old baby. I'm pretty sure my mom is using her as a coping mechanism. About a year before I got pregnant, my grandma died from COVID. We were devastated, but the moment I got pregnant, it was like her eyes lit up. It started off small, like when I was pregnant we got into an argument over me naming my baby something different than what she wanted. She wanted to name my baby after my grandma because I just feel like she sent her down to me. She has an entire other side of family, and whenever I send her to spend time with them, she calls my phone and blows me up, asking me, why is she over there? How long? I need their number so I can call them. She completely disregards I'm her parent. Last night we got into an argument because it's my grandma's birthday today, and we were going to visit family. Typically the baby will go, but her family asked to spend some time with her this week, so I sent her over. I told my mom it was just me going, and she completely went off of me, talking about how I know it's my grandma's birthday coming up, and I know the baby makes her feel better, so why would I send her anyways? She started talking to me crazy, and she yelled at me, saying I was going to pick her up and that she was going. I would just give in, but finally I put my foot down. I explained to her I don't think it's a big deal if she didn't go. She's a baby, she doesn't know my grandmother. I told her I tired of her using my baby as a crutch instead of actually getting better. I told her the only reason you want her there is so she can be your teddy bear. I told her my child isn't a tool for when she misses me grandma. I don't know, part of me feels like I shouldn't have said it, part of me feels guilty. But I don't think I can keep living like this. She's so suffocating. Let's dive into our next story. My parents have made wedding planning a nightmare. I just want to rant. It's been a year of parents being completely insufferable. From the beginning, my dad has told me that he either plans for the whole wedding or doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but that has not been the case, and makes it very clear when he hates something. My fiancé and I are paying for wedding, FYI. Where do I start? They didn't like the venue, a beautiful golf course. They weren't happy with the guest count of 250 because they wanted double that. They're not happy with the DJ I picked and wanted to bring their own musician. My mom hated my wedding dress because I didn't pick the one she wanted. She's grown to like it, but is now complaining about the way it's being altered. She wanted to add some sparkles to the dress, which I've denied. They hate the layout of the tables at the venue. My dad tried to get us to change our first wedding song to a song of his choice. They hate that I'm not playing more traditional music from their culture, even though I'm splitting the songs even with my fiancé who's from a different culture. I brought my mom and mother-in-law to meet with the decorator to get their opinion, and my mom hates the decor and embarrassed me in front of the decorator because she didn't have what my mom envisioned, and what I picked was too simple. It's just elegant and fits in with the venue. In my tradition, the bride literally dances her way out of her parents' house, and it's a huge ordeal with drummers waiting outside. Anyway, I'm an introvert and not a huge dancer, so I asked them to just skip the dancing and drummers and make it simple with classic music playing in the background, and everyone just hanging out. It's a loud event, and it's just not for me. My mom cried on the phone when I told her this. I just got my engagement pictures back today. We went for a simple shoot in the city, and my dad criticized every single picture, told me to tell the photographer that they're awful and to get a new photographer for the wedding. The photographer and her husband are both guests at the wedding as they're friends of ours, and the pictures turned out beautiful. They've basically tried to control every single thing, down to the last detail. Wedding is in 2.5 weeks and I can't stand them anymore. On to the next story. My mom told her bum-ass friend my medical history. Hi everyone, my mom is a helicopter mom. I'm 27 years old and I still live with her because I live in an expensive city and I only work part-time because I got laid off in October. Her bum friend is named Hung. He's Vietnamese Chinese. He used to crash at our place and he would call me fat. He said I gained weight double the size, but he would say it to my mom behind my back. He would gamble his money away then sleep over. My brother and his girlfriend were uncomfortable with him staying over because we all live there. And he was freeloading on and off for a few days every few months. Whenever his sister would kick him out, he finally found a permanent place to stay at. So I came home from the pharmacy because they increased my dosage because I had been struggling with an health issue. She tells him about my eating habits, how my medication dosage got increased, and how I don't work out as much compared to my brother. I tell her multiple times not to tell him, as it is not his business. Then she ignores me and keeps telling him. This dude smokes a pack a day, calls me fat, and then she told him my whole medical history. I'm so upset. And she doesn't care. Asian parents are something else. I'm just annoyed. She even tries to interfere with the doctor and tells her that she will talk to them. I tell her not to, as it is my business. For our next story. Entitled Disney Adult Demands That I Change Clothes in the Middle of a Crowded Restaurant. To preface, this situation came up a few years back but still lives rent-free in my mind from how absurd it was. I was on a family vacation at Disney World a few years back. I, 19 at the time, was staying on property at a resort. But on our first night, we had dining reservations at a different hotel that was a fair distance away. It was a casual buffet-style restaurant, so there was no dress code or reason to be fancy. So I wore a pair of shorts and a graphic tee of a unicorn that said "Everything sucks" in a glittery cursive font. About halfway into dinner, when I got up to get seconds, a woman, probably in her 40s, stepped up to physically block me and immediately started shouting in my face about my obscene clothing. I just stood there, completely baffled, while she went on and on about her young children, who were calmly eating on the other side of the room, being distressed by my disgusting and inappropriate shirt, and then demanded I take it off. In the middle of the restaurant. When I told her I don't exactly carry replacement clothes with me, she demanded that I go to the gift shop and buy a new family-friendly shirt, specifically one with Disney princesses or Minnie on it, because that's what her children would like to see. At that point, I didn't want to deal with her anymore and said that I'm not here to appeal to kids I don't even know. The waitress would have stopped me at check-in if there was a problem with my clothing, and I just wanted to eat my dinner and leave. I walked away to get the rest of my meal and left her screaming at me for a few minutes before she eventually gave up. Hope those kids turned out okay. Let's dive into our next story. Am I the a-hole for not letting my in-laws see my newborn the day he was born? For some backstory, my wife and I had a 24-week pregnancy end in tragedy roughly 2 years before this story. This left us feeling very protective of our most recent pregnancy. Our son decided he wanted to wait until the last possible second to arrive, so we were scheduled for an induction. The entire time we were in the hospital, I was constantly getting bombarded by her parents with texts asking for updates on what was happening. I did my best to keep up with them until my wife got frustrated and told me to leave them on read. At roughly 7 p.m. my wife gave birth to a beautiful baby boy and I could not have been happier. We let everyone know he was here and were immediately asked what room we were in so that her parents could come see him. We hadn't even left the delivery room yet, no visitors allowed there, and told them that we were too tired for visitors that night. They constantly hounded us until we got to the maternity floor, around midnight, and we went to bed. We awoke to angry texts and voicemails from my father-in-law saying how disappointed he was that we were so selfish and careless for not letting them come see their grandson. My mother-in-law even had the audacity to say, "I might as well mourn this one too." All of this gutted my wife as she had just pushed a human being out of her, and she was already emotionally exhausted. For the remainder of our stay at the hospital, they refused to come visit and wouldn't talk to us no matter what we said. The attitude kept up for the first 2 weeks of our son's life until I forced a confrontation over the phone, where we were berated for not keeping them updated enough, not letting them come invade our space at midnight in the hospital, and making her father-in-law waste a PTO day. My son was born after he would have gotten off work, so it wouldn't have made a difference. In the end, I apologized just so my wife could stop stressing as it was affecting her recovery. So am I the a-hole? Our last story for today. My parents are letting my wife and I rent their second house, and they think that gives them the right to tell us how to live. I'm in a tough spot with my parents. They offered me their second home at half the market rate, which I accepted and asked them to vacate the previous tenant. However, they often insult me and my Chinese wife, with my mom making racist remarks about her culture, and my dad belittling me and telling me without them I'd starve to death, despite the fact I have a successful career. The house needs new flooring and they expect me to cover the cost. Despite their financial help, they still treat me like a teenager, offering unsolicited advice and insults. After a recent fight where my dad called me a prepubescent idiot and my mom went on a racist rant, I left the property without helping them repaint it. I told them I'm not moving in, and they can do what they want with the house. I said this with a ton of rage and profanity. My therapist told me as an adult you have a mom and dad, not parents, because you're responsible for yourself. When I said that to my parents, they both flipped out, saying I'm being brainwashed and that I don't love them. It's like making me live their way is always the end goal. I only have value to them if I'm how they want. Clarification. My wife doesn't know about the racism. Luckily, my parents and I are bilingual, so she doesn't know what they said. She just knows they're jerks. Clarification 2. We still live in our current apartment. This was an offer I rejected. And those are all the stories we have for today. See you tomorrow.